Everybody, welcome back to the channel. Jay with Pure Vision Training Solutions. We're back with the TTI Combat, except today we're not going to be out on the range. Today we're going to talk about maintenance. We're going to tear this thing apart. I'm going to show you how to take off this proprietary compensator. It's a little tricky at first, so first thing we're going to do though, we're going to make sure the weapon is clear, nothing in the chamber, okay? And it's the same with the rest of the Caniks. You're going to squeeze the trigger, you're going to press down on those locking block tabs, and the slide's going to come right off. I'm going to pull the recoil spring out, and I'm going to stick the barrel out about 1.5 inches, right? What I usually do is I just take a screwdriver or something like that. Right here, there's a locking tab on this comp. You press it in, turn the comp, and it should pop right off there, okay? So now we have the comp off. We're going to take this all the way down. Another thing I do when I'm doing maintenance on these is I drop the back plate off. So you just press in on the striker just a little bit. There's a tab or a spot for a screwdriver right on top, and you pull that rear plate off, okay? Striker assembly's out. I'm not going to tear this down. You can replace these striker springs, things like that, firing pins. You know, normally when you buy these directly from Canik, they're going to come together anyway. So now let's look at some maintenance stuff with these. So on Caniks, they have usually 3 pins. One here, and one in the back. So if you're ever going to do a trigger in one of these, they come apart pretty simple. So we're going to do that here in just a second. I'm going to pop this whole gun apart. We're going to take everything out and show you how I do a deep clean on these Caniks. Alright, so taking these pins out is pretty simple on these. What you don't want to do, I see a lot of guys, they'll hammer this pin out. That's not how it's supposed to come out. If you watch the way I do this, you'll be able to get this pin out and back in super easy without breaking anything. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the middle pin out. Hold your finger on top of the slide stop thing right here. There is a detent and a spring underneath that. That pin just pushes right out, nice and simple. I'm going to drop that off. Pull that spring and detent out. Okay, so we got the detent, got the locking block, and I'll get that spring out of the way. So down in here, it's going to be super hard to see on this video, but you'll see the piece I'm talking about in just a second once I take this out. So all you do is take this tool and slide that. It's almost like a detent itself that holds the front pin in place. So once you do that, that front pin comes right out. Super simple, okay? We're going to take a small pair of needle nose or something like that and get the slide release spring down underneath so there's no tension on that anymore. We are also going to, I keep saying there's 3 pins, technically there's 4 because of this guy. So we're going to pull that. Now what that did is it just released that trigger. This side does come off. It's up to you if you want to take it off or not. It's just a little cutout there for it. Then we're going to take, finally, the last pin out that holds the trigger control assembly in. This one sometimes you need to tap a little, but not very hard. It'll come right out to you. So now that that's out, you have to get this block out of the way. This is one of the harder parts. Sometimes I'm able to do it with a pair of needle nose or something like that. A lot of times I'll just put a little bit of pressure on it just to get it to budge off the side of the slide. Just be careful not to press too hard and mess up your, I said slide, but the lower receiver. Once you get that out, this is that little piece of metal I was talking about for that front pin. You got to make sure this goes back in with the long side forward. Then basically you can take that spring out and everything else will just kind of pop out just like so. Okay, that's basically it. So now I'm going to go through, I'm going to go scrub this down, get everything else cleaned back up, and we'll go back through reassembly. Alright, well, we're back from the kitchen. Got the lower cleaned up pretty good. Just, like I said, some Dawn dish soap and an old toothbrush. Works great. So I went through and I cleaned everything else. A lot of people, you know, it's really up to you guys on what you're gonna use. I use the bore cleaner for my pistol. It helps break down and get that carbon that's on the feed ramp really good. CLP is usually what I use for the rest of everything. And then I use one step when I'm putting everything back together on any moving parts, right? So we'll start putting this thing back together and show you where I lube and that kind of stuff. So you gotta be, these strikers can be a little tricky getting back in, so you just wiggle it in, don't force it. And I do the same thing. I take the screwdriver and press down on the striker, and then slide the rear plate back on. So as far as putting the comp back on, basically the same idea. You're gonna hold the barrel out a little bit. You're gonna take the comp about a 40-degree angle, twist it, and it walks back in. And put your spring back in. So now we're back from the kitchen. Everything's cleaned up. I cleaned all the rest of these parts, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing back together. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna slide the trigger down into the trigger well. Get everything back nice and where it's supposed to be. Okay, so next thing we're gonna do is put that spring back in here. I'm gonna throw this guy on. I'm gonna get this block back in. Don't forget, this little guy right here has to go back in first. I get that down in there nice and good, where it's supposed to be. Get this block back in. Now we'll line up the trigger and get this to slide back in. There we go. Now one thing I'm going to do right away is I'm going to grab that spring so I don't forget for later. Get that back set. Then I'm going to take the front pin, I'm going to put that back in first. Because if you don't put that back in first, then you won't be able to get your detent and the rest of it in the right spot. I'm going to go ahead and get that to go forward, which locks that front pin in. I'm going to go ahead and put the rear pin in. This one should go pretty easy. Let's give a little push on that side. That one will actually click into place, you'll hear it. Now all we have left is the detent, spring. Let's do it this way. Put that like so we don't lose that spring. Get it pushed down nice and good. And as you can see, there's a little spot for that detent on this pin. So it's a little tight getting it back in. And there we go. I pushed it a little too far, so we got to push it back out. And get this other side going. Basically, that's it. So everything looks like it's moving properly. I'm going to lube up a little bit on my trigger. I'm going to lube the springs back here, any moving parts, right? So anything I can find that moves and rubs on something else, I'm going to put a little bit of lube on it. So as far as lubing here, I'm just going to drop a few drops of lube in there. I'm going to lube down in where the spring is for the striker. A little bit on the safety block release. And then, of course, the metal pieces where the slide and lower meet. And then I'm going to put a few drops of lube in the slide itself where it moves. And I like to just put a few drops on the spring and guide rod. So now we're going to put this back together into a functions check. Make sure we got it all together right. So again, we're clear, safe. We're going to squeeze the trigger. I'm going to pull the slide to the rear. Release the trigger. You should hear the click from the reset. And then you can pull the trigger again. So everything seems like it's working pretty good. I'll run that lube around a little bit on that slide. And this one is basically done. I'm ready to go back in the gun cabinet. Don't forget about your optic. You know, don't use shitty glass, or you got to be careful with some optics, first of all, I guess, because they're polymer coated lenses, and if you get cleaning lubricants or anything like that on them, it could mess up the plastic. So you want to be smart when you're buying an optic. Buy something that, you know, is going to last you and be good quality. Alright guys, we just did a deep clean on the Canik TTI. I showed you how to tear it completely apart, wash everything, put it all back together, do a functions check. I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you on the next one.